Enterprises are bleeding millions of dollars into software while completely ignoring the human friction that literally renders it useless. Organizations pour staggering amounts of capital into enterprise resource planning systems, ERPs, with this massive intention to revolutionize their digital infrastructure. And the objective is always clear, right? Reduce costs, drive revenue, and orchestrate complex processes across all your departments. Yet, the reality is a massive disconnect. Financial and IT executives get heavily involved in selecting and integrating these new systems, and they end up treating the technical go-live as the finish line. That is a fundamental miscalculation. Technology changes absolutely must begin with process changes. When leaders ignore the operational mechanics of digital adoption, they create this high-friction environment where highly capable software just becomes multi-million-dollar shelfware. And the financial consequences here are immediate and they are measurable. Look at this. 38.4% of organizations blow right past their ERP budgets. Why does that happen? Well, the data points to a really specific operational failure, and it's inadequate project staffing. We're not talking about software bugs or server failures here. It is a severe underestimation of the human resources actually required to navigate the transition. Without skilled people to implement and manage the project, everyday tasks take longer, overworked staff make mistakes, and then the resulting rework just inflates the budget exponentially. But it's not just the budget. The timeline decay is honestly just as severe. The median ERP project bleeds out over 15.5 months. In fact, fewer than half, only 49.7% of these projects actually hit their original timelines. You have to remember, ERPs are complex systems deeply ingrained in an organization's digital infrastructure. Your workforce has already built these strong, rigid habits surrounding legacy systems across various business functions. So, the interconnected nature of these platforms, when you combine it with high employee resistance to change, creates a massive friction environment where progress just crawls.
So, let's break this down. Section 1. Anatomy of System Implementations.
Leading ERP vendor Oracle actually identifies 4 strict friction points during adoption. First, project management and planning suffer simply because organizations underestimate the phases, everything from initial discovery to post-launch analysis. Then, data integration is uniquely brutal. Trying to untangle duplicate data sources represents a literal logistical nightmare. Just moving this data alone can consume up to 15% of your total ERP cost. Cost and timeline overruns expand because internal resources are stretched way too thin. And finally, effective change management is absolutely required to drive adoption and overcome stakeholder resistance, which adds this massive layer of complexity that technical teams are rarely equipped to handle.
And this right here exposes the measurement problem that most organizations get completely wrong. They confuse deployment with actual adoption. Think about deployment metrics for a second. License provisioning, system logins, and training completion. Now, these are super easy to track, and they indicate momentum and activity, but they are incredibly misleading. Compare that to actual adoption metrics, behavior change, workflow integration, and proficiency over time. If you are only measuring deployment, you drastically increase your risk of ending up with shelfware. A system login just shows an employee open the software. Workflow integration actually proves they embedded the tool into how they execute their daily tasks. Which brings us to Section 2, Uncovering the Hidden Friction.
Now, this data completely flips the standard IT narrative on its head. Technical failures? They're mostly a red herring. According to ProSci data on enterprise tech adoption, a massive 38% of challenges stem from user proficiency issues. That is more than double the rate of technical integration barriers, which sit way down at just 16%. Let that sink in. Organizations are not failing because the tools don't work. They are failing because employees lack the proficiency to use them effectively, and enterprises rarely measure that gap with enough specificity to actually act on it.
To make matters worse, this proficiency gap is compounded by severe structural misalignment within the company. There's a fundamental disconnect in how different levels of the organization even perceive the new system. Executives operate with high trust, scoring a plus 1.09, and they focus entirely on strategic outcomes and cost efficiency. But frontline workers, the people actually executing the processes inside the ERP, they have a vastly lower trust level at just plus 0.33. Their motivation is entirely different. They focus purely on practical task application. So leaders are driving strategic mandates downward, while frontline workers are just encountering practical workflow friction upward. This misalignment is exactly why transformations stall out.
So the undeniable reality is this. Human factors matter 6 times more than technical factors in realizing ERP benefits. That is a massive multiplier. The ultimate return on a multi-million-dollar software investment
depends heavily on whether your people actually adopt and use the new system. The people side of change is the absolute highest leverage investment an organization can make, far outweighing technical configuration.
Let's move into how we actually fix this. Section 3, the Tactical Action Plan.
This all begins with the ProSci AD model, which is a framework mapping the 5 building blocks of individual change. You need awareness of the need for change, desire to participate, knowledge on how to change, ability to implement the required skills, and finally, reinforcement to sustain that change. The specific failure most technology initiatives share is the fatal gap between knowledge and ability. See, training completion simply indicates that an employee received knowledge. It absolutely does not mean they have the independent ability to execute the task under real conditions in their actual daily workflow. Now, taking that individual model and scaling it to an organizational level gives us the ProSci 3-phase process. Phase 1 is prepare approach, where you define success metrics tailored to each group rather than just settling for a one-size-fits-all model. Phase 2 is manage change, where you take direct action to build that ADCAR progression across the entire enterprise. And Phase 3 is sustain outcomes, which is all about transitioning ownership of the change from the implementation project team to the actual business itself. And we can see these exact system gates applied in the real world. Take Eisner-Amper's rollout of SAP and other systems to over 3,300 employees. They didn't silo their teams. They bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical ability by conducting user acceptance testing as a strict, tight partnership between project management and change management. They actively leveraged the outputs of project milestones to inform their impact assessments. This kind of integrated testing ensures that before the system ever goes live, the workforce actually has the proven ability to operate it.
So how do you scale this ability across thousands of users? Enterprises are deploying technology specifically built for human change. A digital adoption platform, or DAP, like WalkMe, forcefully bridges that knowledge-ability gap. It provides in-app guidance, workflow automation, deep UI technology, and omnichannel support. Instead of sending an employee away to hunt through some dusty 50-page PDF training manual, platforms like WalkMe embed the guidance directly into the software interface itself. It supports the user in real time, within the exact workflow they are actively trying to execute. It attacks workflow friction precisely where it occurs.
Integrating that guidance directly into the flow of work yields hard, measurable operational efficiency. Organizations leveraging this capability report up to a 70% reduction in training time, resources, and overall costs. You effectively eliminate the never-ending cycle of disconnected training by helping employees master change exactly when they encounter it in the software. You replace frustration with immediate, actionable proficiency. Ultimately, this leaves every organization facing a very stark, binary outcome. The technology will inevitably be deployed. The go-live date will happen for sure. But will it actually deliver the strategic value that was promised in the boardroom? That answer relies entirely on whether you are merely installing software or if you are actively engineering the behavioral change required to make that software work. V-Packaging Blueprint. Thumbnail Text Hook. The Silent ERP Killer. Thumbnail visual concept. A minimalist, high-contrast layout with a pitch black or dark charcoal background. The single focal element must be a glowing red, downward trending line chart overlaying a blurred, complex software interface resembling SAP or Oracle. Key graphic assets. B-roll overlays. 1. A 4-layer AI adoption measurement model, pyramid diagram. Activation, behavioral change, business impact, culture or governance, to overlay during the discussion of adoption metrics on slide 6. 2. A flowchart graphic demonstrating a user journey through an ERP system using deep UI technology and omnichannel DAP to overlay the audio during slide 15.